Okay, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I appreciate that we're going to have a few more stragglers that continue to come in, but want to say thank you very much for joining this member town hall and webinar. The couple housekeeping items before we get started. A little bit of a disclaimer for everyone. This is an internal Geopath members call and meeting. So the information we're going to share is considered private. It's considered confidential, and it's not for public dissemination. It does contain, as I said, confidential information. So we ask that you treat it as such. If you feel that you cannot treat it as such, we'll give you the opportunity now to exit the meeting. Pause. Okay, great. So while we did request and receive some level of questions in advance, and we are going to be doing some Q&A as we go through, we ask that you use the chat and send any questions you have through the chat. We will do our best to get through everything that comes in, and if we don't, apologies in advance. Then we will get back to you immediately after or soon after the call with any answers and responses that we have. With that, as you can see, kind of just a quick session overview. We're going to hear comments from our chairperson, Ali Broback, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the 2025 data set and the improvements in the release, which many of you already had. We'll pause after each section. If you do have any questions for Ali, we can address those. Any questions for me, we'll address those as well. And then we have Dan Levy from Clear Channel is going to talk about the collaboration project we've had underway for the last several months between Geopath and the OAAA. So before I hand it to Ali, for me, Rob Peterson, just for those of you who don't know me, sorry, probably could have started with that. I've been interim president for the last number of months. I've been involved for over a year now. It's really hard to believe that I've been involved for over a year. Initially, I came in to help bridge the president to president, as well as work through some of the financial challenges that were going on with Geopath last year. I guess we've been successful at least in one of those, because we're all still here as Geopath. So financially, we're absolutely more stable and more efficient. Perhaps I failed in the president thing, but I'll let Ali talk a little bit more about that bridge and where that's going as she gets into her comments. We also kind of set a goal over a year ago, actually around October last year, when I was speaking with the board about how we become more transparent and communicate more often and rebuild the credibility of Geopath. So this, to me, this member town hall, we did have one in December. Not many of you may have been on it, but this is kind of that one more step in both rebuilding that credibility and providing that transparency that we want to provide to our members. So, and achieving that goal. Ali will absolutely, I'm sure, speak to that transparency and communication further. Finally, I guess what I would offer is open door. Please follow up. I have had the opportunity to speak with many of you. I really enjoy the industry. I really enjoy speaking with you and everything that you all do, the passion that you have for the industry. So open door, please feel free to reach out to me, reach out to anybody on the Geopath team with questions, follow up, challenge us. We appreciate the challenge because we absolutely want to be better every day. If you wish to get further involved in Geopath, in subcommittees, in the board, then by all means also raise your hand and we would welcome that. With that, I will hand it off to Ali.
All right, thank you, Rob. And thank you everybody for joining us today. I am very excited and quite honored to take on this responsibility as chairperson, and I wanted to give you all just a peek into my leadership style. I'm a big believer in clear and concise communication, and I think that Rob just mentioned that as well, but we're really trying to elevate that here at Geopath with our members. And I'm looking forward to bringing a whole new level of transparency to all of you. I also plan to increase participation and accountability within the board of directors, which will in turn provide more resources to you, our members. And lastly, I'll be working to strengthen the relationships across the industry. First and foremost, work on how Geopath and OAAA can work together more cohesively. I'm sure you're all wondering where we're at with our search for the next president of Geopath, but you can rest assured that we have not lost sight of how important this is. Our search committee worked really, really hard last spring, actually, at sifting through tons of, like hundreds of resumes and interviewing several candidates. And at that time, they didn't find anybody that was really right for the job when it came down to those final candidates. So we put the project on hold just for a short while, and we've got plans to reinvigorate the search in the coming weeks. But in the interim, we're very thankful for the WISE group and specifically Rob and his leadership. We're excited to find the right person to steer this ship and introduce you all to them, hopefully early next year sometime. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for updates on that as we go through these next few months. A little bit more about me. My day job is running revenue for ODN. We're an out-of-home placement agency based out of Chattanooga. I lead our account management, sales, and marketing teams, as well as production and art services. I started my career as an account executive at CBS Outdoor, now known as Outfront, and I actually still have the contract from the first bus shelter I ever sold at the University of Minnesota campus, selling out-of-home here in Minneapolis. And that was like 19 years ago. So out of home's been in my blood for a long time. It was really when back then, that was really the start of me falling in love with this industry. And I think if you talk to anyone that's worked with me, they'll tell you that there's just no lack of passion for all things out of home. For me personally, I'm a wife, a mom, raising two boys here in Minneapolis. And no, we do not live in igloos. But yes, I do have a hockey rink in my backyard that we set up every winter and we get out and skate on all the time. So we love all things Minnesota. Lastly, I want to reiterate Rob's comments about our open door policy. We'd love to hear from any and all members as we shape the direction of Geopath and our industry's future of measurement. Obviously, it's a very pivotal time. And Dan will be touching on the great work that we've been doing in conjunction with the OAAA here shortly. But it's really something I'm really proud of, and I'm really excited for you all to learn more about. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it back to Rob.
Thank you, Allie. If you have any questions for Allie, just throw them in the chat. I know she's anxious to answer some things. I guess starting off in this new data set, what I would ask everybody what we're trying not to do is litigate the past, I guess. The past on some level is the past. And by that, I mean, I certainly can't answer for decisions that had been made 1, 2, 5 years ago and why things happened. What I can do is say, this is what happened, and here's where we're going and why we're going in this direction, and what this new release and data set actually means. So that's the other disclaimer, perhaps. So if we can scroll to the next slide, what we thought we'd start doing is talking just about kind of the building blocks of out-of-home measurement. Like, where do we start? And when you think about Geopath really has the measurement aspect of it, which everybody knows, but we also have that more important, actually, audited inventory side, all of your inventory, in our database and how we are measuring that. So that's really where we start. We start with that audited inventory and the road network, and we standardize on that across the road network. And then when we add in from that road network, the circulation, pedestrian vehicular circulation, that comes from a couple of our data providers, the Department of Transportation. We load in our speed data. We add in, connected cars, GPS navigation. We add in, again, trip info in those areas, in those locations, people going home to work, what the trips are like, where they're going, how they're moving about. That comes from our mobile location data. Again, we use third parties to provide that, and that gets rationalized across our platform. And then finally, what we're adding in is demographic information. So the demographic information comes from either US Census or Claritas, which is also a third party. When you combine all of that across the platform, we rationalize it with our visibility, reach and frequency, and that populates into our Insight user interface, or the APIs in some cases. So perfect world. We update that on a well, in some cases it's a monthly basis for a lot of the pedestrian stuff and the things that we add in the recency of it. We're updating our road network, and a lot of the circulation information at least annually, to provide from our third parties that we get and from the Department of Transportation. So again, not litigating the past as we move on. What happened on the annual data set, it had not been updated since 2019 for the most part. The only things we were updating, trip information that was coming in, so that was helping with recency, but we weren't updating kind of that census. A little bit of the census that was happening, it got delayed, as everybody would recall, from COVID, so there was a little bit of delay there. We were updating new inventory that came in. Obviously, we were populating that, place-based inventory, but effectively 2019 data set that was released was based on 2018 traffic data, and that really carried through all the way through until this latest release. So yes, for sure, in the last 5+ years, there have been changes. Many of you should know. If you don't, I'm sorry that we work off of aged data at least a year old, because that's when the DOT collects that information and provides it to our partner, and then they do their workings and modelings and then provide it to us, and we do our analysis and work it through our reach and frequency modeling, and that's what we provide. So we're usually working off of a year. In this particular case, because it was so old, we're starting at 23, but we do have plans to bring us into 25 for next year's planning cycle. So on the next slide, what we'll talk about is what happened actually last year. As I mentioned, we didn't really update through 2018. Last year, the decision was made to really only update the trip information, which really is the place-based piece of this, and only for new boards. Again, I'm not here to litigate the past, what decided, who decided, and why, but that's where we're seeing this most recent release and changes. So in 2025, what we just put out a couple of weeks ago, everything was updated. We addressed everything and then some. So what we'll go through a little bit more is not just the audited inventory, all of the new boards that were put out, the new road network, right? The old network, and we'll talk about, was being sunset, so we have a new road network. So a lot of work went into it. We updated circulation, we updated the speed information. All of these criteria that we had been doing on a more regular basis that we hadn't done in the last 5 years have now been updated again. And we're quite frankly very proud. I'm very proud of the team, and I hope you are as well, because it was a very large amount of work to get through and try and provide you this transparency. We worked with our internal teams as well, subcommittees that we have, and we appreciate the volunteers that are on those subcommittees who work with us and work through this data. This process that we released in September, it started last year around this time, maybe November, when we went to the board and the executive committee, and we talked about two options. We could either update like we had been, which is just trip data, kind of a Band-Aid onto some very old data, or we do the whole thing. And I think the right decision was made in, it's time, we have to do this update, let's do the update. And while we're doing it, we're going to update platforms, we're going to update a lot of our systems and tools along with that as best we can. And so from November, December last year when the decision was made. The team has been working very hard and diligently in getting that updated. As you can see, and I won't go through each one of these, receiving that road network, migrating that inventory, all metadata, it takes a tremendous amount of compute power and iterations. It's a very much an iterative process that we go through as an organization to make sure that it's right. We challenge our data providers on a very consistent basis. Speed went up 20 miles an hour. Why did it go up 20 miles an hour? Prove to us that it went up, and it's a rational, reasonable change. And in a lot of cases, quite frankly, and I give Janagu and the team a tremendous amount of credit. We were proven to be correct, and when we challenged things, they came back. We went through 8 to 9 months of challenging our vendors and data vendors on that. And in some cases, they were correct as well in rationalizing those numbers and that metadata. We worked with, as I mentioned, our insights subcommittee. That's a subcommittee that meets typically on a monthly basis. It was made more frequently as we were going through this release. Tremendous amount of credit for them stepping out of their day jobs to do this work for us and with us and collaborate with Geopath. So that was great. And we could probably not have had the success or even the credibility with their senior leadership if they had not been involved. And so we're grateful for that. As we walk through the first and second quarter of 2025, we started socializing these little carve-outs. We validated new inventory that came on, put it onto the new road network. We had to migrate from, as I mentioned, our HERE network, which was the old, over 10 plus years old network that hadn't been updated, to what's now the OpenStreetMaps network. And that is a new update for us, and it really provides a lot more urbanicity that we hadn't provided or had in the past. So kudos to that migration to our new road network. And then also, obviously, here we are implementing this new model, again, working very closely with our partners in the Insights Committee, which is made up of both operators as well as agencies to support this. Let's move on through the next one. So let's talk a little bit more about what changed and why it matters. I mentioned already the road network change. So it does allow us to use more updated circulation data because of that. A building that may not have been there when HERE network was here in 2016 or 2017 was built. And we know there's a tremendous amount of building going on. And so we didn't have that necessarily. Now we have that. Inventory on newly constructed roadways more easily updated in the future as well, which a lot of the things, while it took us over 10 months to do in this iteration of the release, the expectation is not that we solved a lot of things, but we found a lot of problems and challenged a lot of things so that the next release, when we challenge, if we have to challenge our providers, they've already fixed these things. These things have already been litigated and discussed with our providers. So I think that makes the process moving forward a lot more streamlined for everyone, and will provide more consistency and a smoothing out of the data, which is really necessary from where you are in 2018, jumping to 2023, and then 24 and 25 will be a little more smooth. We mentioned roadside reach and frequency, accounting for audience overlaps, nearby frames, adding spots, audience or extending the plan's duration. Now always increase the plan. So again, a lot of change that was going on that's benefited us. Next, Scott, why don't you build out, please? Place-based measurement methodology, visitation estimates have been improved. So from a roadside improvement data, more vehicular references for us. So overall, I think what I'd say is we've been adding to the data sets that are directly measured or indirectly measured. It provides more what we consider kind of the ground truths when we're either multiplying by 2 or 9 times on the pedestrian counts, it absolutely provides us more quality numbers. And on the kind of place-based, when we talk about improved precision and traffic volume accuracy, it just, again, post-pandemic, it's allowing us to be, I guess, more relevant, more recent than we had in the past. And again, updated movement and reference data, improved precision, accuracy. So next slide, Scott. So what does all of this mean? Yes, there's been change for sure. 88% of frames experience change greater than 10% plus or minus, right, on pedestrian circulation. So I think that's obviously going to be a tremendous amount of impact. 62% of frames experience a change in average speed. I mentioned average speed before, exceeding 5 miles an hour. Obviously, that means time in the view shed is going to be less. So that's going to be impactful for a lot of the frames that we have for transit shelters, things like that. 56% of frames experienced a change greater than 20% in vehicular roadway circulation. And so that impacts total impressions. 53% of the frames experience a change in visual clutter. So an environment, the area type I mentioned before, a building being built that wasn't there before, a bridge being built, a roadway being changed, or an off ramp having now a building in between it and what was the frame before. So a lot of these things have been adjusted now with the new roadway network, which is important, but it creates obviously a little bit of concern and confusion, or an increase or a decrease. We always are concerned about decreases, but the reality is sometimes it's increased, and it calls into question as well. 24% of the frames have undergone change in the roadway assignments. So again, increased precision for that latest roadway network that's been brought on. And then finally, vehicular occupancy, number of people per car changed by less than 1%, so across roadway segments. So we're able to measure that from an occupancy perspective, and that change obviously affects measurement and the viewing in the VAI. So here's kind of an illustrative example of what's really changed across the database of impressions. So we just pulled really 5 different frames across the country that we wanted to show. And across the top, you can see pedestrian circulation and average speed, vehicular circulation, urbanicity, roadway assignments, and occupancy. So these are all kind of those 6 criteria that are going to be impactful. It's not just one thing that changes the frame. In this transit shelter in Miami, Florida, 4 things adjusted that measurement, right? Pedestrian circulation, average speed, roadway assignment, and vehicular occupancy. The 2 digital bulletin boards here, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later. In San Jose, 4 things changed, and in Prescott, Arizona, only urbanicity changed and impacted that digital bulletin. So there's a lot of adjustments within the criteria for a particular frame. It's not just one thing. And again, you can see the bulletin, and for example, in Buffalo, 4 things changed there: speed and circulation, urbanicity, and assignments of the roadway. So I hope this kind of gives you a little bit of a view into those criteria that we take into account that could be impactful to your frame, either up or down. And if you have any other questions on that, we can do that. Again, I called out those 2 very similar West Coast digital bulletins, where in Prescott, Arizona, which I happen to know, my wife went to school there, has grown, and I was there 2 years ago, has grown like tremendously over the last 5 to 10 years. Urbanicity was a big change for that particular bulletin board, but not much else. On the digital bulletin board, in San Jose, 4 things have affected that change in that frame. So I think that's about the end of it. What I would suggest is a couple of things. We'll go through some questions as well if there are any, and I'll ask Scott. But we have 2 follow-up webinars that we are putting on, and I thank the team for organizing that and arranging it. That will allow you a lot more detail than I can ever provide around both the data set, the support materials, the changes that we just talked about, and so I would encourage you to join those. They've been announced, the dates have been put out there, and I believe registration's open. If you haven't gotten anything or you need to receive a registration link, send a note to our Geek Out group, and they'll absolutely be able to respond to you. But there are materials available for everybody to look at. A lot of what, quite frankly, we used to build this last few slides. A question was asked, and then Scott, I'll ask you to let me know if there are any others. But I know we had a question that did come in about the ability to challenge the frames and the measurement of your own assets and inventory. And by all means, we ask you to do that. We ask you to be patient with us if you're going to challenge it, because we do have a few members that are challenging things, and it takes us some time to investigate and to go back to our providers of data and have them escalate or investigate it, and then come back to us. So, but by all means, work with the team. There's a Geopath team here that is there to support its members. And by all means, work with them on challenges. Send us a note. Send a note to Geek Out. If you know that a particular individual that you work with as a team member, send a note to them with your frame IDs that you're questioning and challenging, and we'll get on the phone and we'll work with you on it. Let's see. There was another question or two. There was a question that started out, which was kind of newer for me as well, quite frankly. The question was about the decision to reuse the same ID as a frame ID for one unit and the spot ID for another unit. It's caused confusion and slowdowns. So what I can tell you, the history of it, I guess, is we did not have the concept of a frame ID represented in the system prior to 2019. Only had spot IDs. So for digital inventory, each spot used the same number with just a letter, I guess, attached to it. And when we launched this new methodology in 2019, the idea of a frame ID was introduced. Again, I'm not going to say whether it was the right idea or the wrong idea to do that, but that's what was introduced at the time. And that represents the total impressions for the unit. Essentially, all of the spots added up for that unit cumulatively. And when the conversion happens, all the legacy inventory that was in the system was given a frame ID. For digital inventory, they used the A spot Geopath ID as the frame ID. But for other spots, they were assigned a new Geopath ID. I'm confused just trying to explain it to you so I understand that. What I've spoken with some of the team is whether or not this is something we should be rationalizing on our own in the next before the next release. Not to confuse the issue anymore, but becoming more consistent is really important to me and to the team, and I think that will eliminate some of the confusion. So we've taken your question, and we are going to turn it into action and investigate it a little bit more. The next question that did come in is around the methodology itself. If the only change is the methodology you're using, how do we tell a client that the audience we've been presenting for the last 3 years was flawed or wrong compared to the new numbers? It's a really good question. I understand from where it's coming from. In my history, in my experience, I ran sales for companies for 10 plus years or so. So I know working with clients can be challenging, and customers, and having to explain things. What I would tell you, and maybe I should have led this whole conversation with this, is what we do in measurement is a little bit of art and a little bit of science. It's not just a hard and fast number 2 + 2 = 4. There are elements to this statistically that are continuing to evolve. this in and of itself, methodology, continues to evolve, just like any other science would evolve, the science of statistics, because data capturing is improving and changing. Mobile data is changing in the way you capture it. The way you're allowed to capture it, quite frankly, is changing as well. So we don't know what's going to happen with ways that you're asked to capture, how you captured. It certainly has changed over the last 10 years. When you think about personally identifiable information, what you're allowed to capture and what you can capture, what you can't anymore. And so it will continue to evolve. And as I mentioned earlier, the important thing for us is to make sure we smooth things out. Drastic changes are no good to anyone. And updating this measurement over one time over effectively a 5-year period obviously has brought about a tremendous amount of challenge, and that's unfortunate. It's not an easy thing to talk with your clients about. I understand that. It doesn't mean that the numbers previously were flawed. It just means that we've evolved them, and the methodology has evolved to be more precise and more. I guess it'll continue to evolve as we go through this. And I know Dan will talk a little bit more about that. With that, Scott, I'll ask, do we have any other questions that we can address or would like to address? I do want to save time for my friend Dan.
Yes, there is one question that came in. Oh, sorry, my screen went blank. So what do you think Geopath can do better on getting media agencies and advertisers to understand and buy into the data sets?
It's almost a softball question. I mean, you might not like the answer, but I really think that meetings like this are what's helpful. I don't know what happened in the past. I don't know. I've heard that these kind of meetings have not happened. What I can tell you is that all the conversations that I have had and the team has had with our data providers in the last 9 months, 10 plus months of us doing this, has been a requirement for them to be more transparent to us in how they collect the data, how they analyze the data, how they model the data, so that we can be more transparent to you. And the best way for us to get buy-in from not just media, from everyone on this call, all members, customers as well, is transparency. So, it's a little bit of the telephone game, us giving you the information that allows you to go out to your agencies or your advertisers and transmit that information that we're providing to you. That's the best way that I know in my career is to gain consensus is transparency. I mean, you have to just lay things out as clearly and concisely as you can. Hopefully I did that today, and that you'll take away some good things from it. One thing I've learned in the last, I've worked with the EC, for those of you, the executive committee who are on the call, we meet every week, and I've learned so much from them. And I'm going to probably, I don't want to overstep too much, but what I'm going to say is that one of the things that I've really learned is it's not just about measurement when you're selling your assets, when you're selling your boards. There's a lot of things that go into that sell for your advertisers. It's the location as well, right? Obviously measurement is important and the reach and frequency is important, but location, size, and scale, that goes into it. Obviously price too. As a salesperson, I don't like to talk about price, but that goes into it as well. So I think that our ability to provide transparency just gives you that one more building block to enable you to sell on all of the different criteria that you have to provide to your advertisers to get that sale. Any other questions, Scott, or we can pass to Dan?
There are at least one, a couple that we can reply directly to the personnel because they're somewhat specific, but one that I think is helpful for everyone to hear. Some of our locations are reflecting impressions that are still under review. And just a general sense of what's the timeline on finalizing that data. If we can give some guidelines on that as well. And I know you started to a little bit already, but just maybe reemphasizing that.
Yeah, I mean, what I could say is we are a small team, and I don't want to make excuses because I hate making excuses. And I know they're on here too, so I'm not giving them, a way out by any means. Um, but we're a small team, so we're working as feverishly as we can. We meet twice a week as a team to talk about the challenges and the things that are going on, how to be more efficient. There is a process that we undertake to review the frames when they're being challenged. And it does take a little bit longer than I'd like to see, quite frankly. So we're going to start working on what that process is. It is a manual process, just like an audit is a manual process of validating when a board first comes in or a frame first comes in. We have to manually validate that. So we're working through what kind of tools we can do to work through that a little more fast. But we also have to transmit it to our data provider to get them to also review the information and walk back. I can't give you because I don't know the specific amount of frames that you're looking at or when it was put out, but I can tell you it's a couple of week process for sure, and we're working through that. All the while, don't forget, and again, not making excuses. We do have new members. We're grateful for that. We have to audit their inventory as well and bring them on board so they get the benefit of the Geopath measurement as quickly as possible too. This release allowed a lot of new members to come in. We released new boards with this and updated that information, so that was great. But we still have more work to do in rolling up our sleeves on these challenges that we have to face. Okay, and with that, I guess what we'll do is we'll pass to Dan Levy. Dan, you are going to talk about this great collaboration that we have going on between Geopath and the OAAA and what the future of measurement could be. So Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Ali, and thanks everyone for joining. It's amazing to see so many people and leaning in. I just want to share a couple things before we get into the slides. What Rob was talking about, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been working in the media industry for 38 years now. I lived through the transition from television measurement on paper diaries to people meters. I lived through the transition from radio doing measurement on diaries to the portable people meters. I lived through and worked through the transition from digital place-based, having no measurement, to embracing Nielsen initially as a primary source of measurement. And now in the out-of-home space, I've been working with Geopath for the last 10 years to help move things forward. The Geopath team has worked really, really hard to make improvements, but there is no such thing as a perfect measurement platform. And so I do think it's important that we all work together on understanding the innovations that have been brought to market, the enhancements that have been brought to market, and really being transparent about some of the ongoing challenges we continue to have, because it is not perfect. But I do think the collaboration, what Rob was talking about, what Al was talking about, the communication is just fundamentally important. Two other things from the perspective of an operator, just to share with you guys. Challenging. If the numbers don't look right to you, if you know your inventory, if you know your markets, if you know your roadways, and you think there's something that needs to be looked at more closely, challenge it. The Geopath team has been great about responding. One of two things will happen. You'll either confirm that the data are accurate based on the new platform and get to an understanding of, like Rob was showing, what are those variables that influenced it, or sometimes the Geopath team will say, you know what, we discovered something and we need to correct that. You have to be engaged, you have to lean in, and the Geopath team is very responsive. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. Okay, so we're going to dive into what's going on as far as looking forward. And before we get into the slides, I want to go back to something that Ali said at the top of the call, the work with the OAAA. So I've been on the board of Geopath for 10 years, and something happened about a year ago. And it was actually through Ali's predecessor. Before Ali was in the board role, it was Michael Lieberman, who at the time was running Group M's out-of-home team. And Michael and the chair of the OAAA board, who happens to be my boss, Scott Wells, came together in a way that I actually had never seen it happen before. There was a realization when both board chairs came together of a reality, which is out-of-home measurement will not and cannot be solved solely by Geopath. It's an industry imperative. And what Michael and Scott did, and now Ali has taken the ball and running with this as the chair of the Geopath board, is brought the two boards together. I'd never really experienced that before. It was an effort to come together and say, if we really truly want to move things forward, it can't be the OAAA sitting over here pointing at Geopath or Geopath sitting over here and point to the OAAA. We have to be able to work together. And so what Michael initially and now Ali is doing, combined with Scott from the OAAA side, is we actually brought the executive committees together for multiple meetings. There was a transparent discussion about the limitations that we have, the realities that we have, the challenges that we have, the progress that we've made. And what it led to was an agreement that we need to be able to solve for the future of measurement together. And so both boards, both executive committees and then ultimately both boards, approved a project that, just to be clear, is 100% jointly funded, 50% OAAA, 50% Geopath, to hire a man named Paul Kulchin as a consultant to work with us to build a plan for where measurement goes next in our industry. Paul is a subject matter expert. Paul has worked at Kantar, he's worked at Nielsen, he comes from a mobile marketing background. He has a deep experience and understanding with how do you build measurement solutions. And what Paul has done is worked extensively to help us build that plan. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Scott. These are the 4 pillars of this assignment. And just to be clear, there's been consultants who have worked on these things in the past. Paul was not hired to focus on vision. Paul was not hired to focus on big, lofty things. Paul was hired as a product expert to work with us to build a plan for how do you build that next generation of measurement. And so the 4 core pillars of what he's working on were based on elevation, creating a data-driven platform that provides a single way for out-of-home to be measured in a way that works across media formats, but also works in the way that the industry requires data today. The goal is to do this in an innovative way, but also an agile way. We can't set it and forget it. The world of data, the world of ad tech are moving so fast, not just because of things that Rob mentioned, like the regulatory environment, but access to data is evolving. And so the recommendation that Paul's working on has to be nimble and has to allow us to not only work in the omnichannel planning and buying environment, but to be something that is not going to be locked into a moment in time. We need the measurement that's provided for our industry to support and facilitate all the great work that's being done on attribution measurement. So Geopath does audience measurement. So many others in the industry rely upon Geopath data to be able to measure efficacy. Is it working? Is it driving results for our customers? And based on that, what are we learning about it? And how can we get into a world where we're actually driving optimization? And then the final is it needs to be a solution that works today that allows us to continue to evolve. Our agency partners, the expectations on them from customers are changing. The access to data continues to evolve. And so we need a platform that gives us the ability to participate in the digital ecosystem, not based on how out-of-home wants to measure itself, but based on the needs of the customers and based on the needs of the agencies who are looking at out-of-home these days, not in a silo off to the side, but as a part of an omnichannel approach. So with that in mind, if you can go to the next one. So here's what Paul has led and the work that both executive committees have been overseeing. Paul has spoken with more than 70 stakeholders across the industry. To be clear, not the out-of-home industry, the media industry. Paul has talked to measurement companies, marketers, media agencies, both out-of-home specialists, as well as people who have a broader purview, measurement companies, data providers. He has been doing the groundwork to really truly understand and come to a thesis on what the needs are of the industry. Through that, he's also not just talked to, but evaluated more than 30 different data and measurement companies to establish benchmarks of what's available today, what the capabilities are of these various companies, some of which are probably represented on this call today, and built that understanding so that we can then lead to where we're going, which is an RFP, which I'll get into in a second. Paul's also looked at not just what the availability of data are and what the availability of measurement solutions are, but what those needs are. This is a process that's leading to a more refined understanding of not we need data, but what type of data and how do we want to approach that? And what are the needs of the agencies? And what's the dynamic nature of that data? Is it real-time data? Is it planning data? It's given us a deeper understanding of industry needs and customer needs and where things are going. And again, I want to emphasize, Paul's not an out-of-home guy. He's a measurement guy. He's a product guy. So he's looked at this through an objective viewpoint to get to the last bullet point here, which is a two-phase approach to this project. The first is this benchmarking and developing ultimately what's leading to an RFP brief. And then the second is that RFP to actually engage with the various solution providers and measurement and data providers to identify those that could work together on a proof of concept test that will lead to a scalable solution. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Scott. All right. So please, actually, you know what? Go back. Take that slide off. Okay. I want to preface this. What I'm about to share with you guys is not the plan. It's an illustrative example of the concept of where we are today and where we're going to. It's a thesis, if you will, that we've put together through the work that Paul is doing of what the type of measurement platform that our industry needs could look like. So please don't do screenshots. Please don't look at this as something that is the product plan. This is illustrative of where we're going and the thesis that forms the foundation for the RFP that we're moving forward on. And one way to look at what I'm about to share with you guys is it's oftentimes referred to as a federated model. The premise that we have through the work that Paul has done and for the two executive committees working together is that there is not going to be a single source of data, either a single type of data or a single data provider that can give everything that our industry needs. A federated model is saying we need to build a platform that can work with multiple different data inputs to be able to output data in a way that allows us to support the various needs of marketers and agencies and media owners. So with that huge caveat, Scott, if you can go to the next slide. This is a high-level view of what it could look like. And again, the thesis that we're working on. The idea here is, and Rob mentioned this fundamentally important role that Geopath plays in understanding the inventory that's out there, the audit function, if you will, is so critically important. And that verified information about the physical nature of the inventory, where it is, how big it is, the dynamic nature of it in terms of facings, right read, center read, left read, all of that is fundamentally important. It's also a model that's built based on an understanding that mobile location data, mobile movement data has to be a part of this. It can't be the only part of it because mobile location data is changing radically, but it has to be a part of it because what that does is gives you a signal to understand where people are, not where we're projecting they are, not where we're modeling they are, not where the Department of Transportation is saying they are, but really truly understanding movement. And then incorporating into that the data that so many members of our industry have that gets to a deeper understanding of our inventory and the way that the agencies are looking at it. Those inputs are intended to then go into a model. That model is going to be built based on the technology that exists today, which is driven by machine learning and AI. The idea is to have a platform that's trained with a variety of different data inputs to be able to understand the role that out-of-home plays in engaging people along their journeys. Movement data is critically important, but there are other things that influence it. Think about something like weather, for example. Weather absolutely changes the way that people are exposed to out-of-home. And we need to build a smart and dynamic platform that can incorporate multiple data inputs that are then, if you look along the bottom, calibrated to truth sets, ground truth, to understand, is the model accurate? We have to be able to calibrate the model and refine the model based on that combination of data inputs, data processing, and then comparing that to things that we know are true, like some of which Geopath already uses, like data that comes from the Department of Transportation or accounting stations or things like that. And then the final thing on the bottom that's critically important is we need to be able to do this not in a silo, but it needs to be able to be an element of what are referred to as identity graphs. Agencies don't plan out of home in a silo. Agencies look at out of home as a part of the mix. And that mix isn't about inventory selection. It's about audience. It's about engaging with audiences. So we have to build a solution that allows our data to plug into those identity graphs and those omni-channel platforms that the agencies are using. And then that's ultimately represented on the right side of this. This has to work for planning platforms, for buying systems. This has to work for DSPs and SSPs because programmatic and automation are so critical for us moving forward. And we have to be able to do this in a way that can then feed into the performance measurement platforms that are being used. We need to help people understand, is it working or not? And without an understanding of the audiences that are actually reached, that's not as accurate as it needs to be. So this is that kind of high level understanding of where things are going. And I can't see if there's any questions on this. So Scott, jump in if there are questions, but we want it to be transparent with everyone about the direction we're going. It has to be a measurement system and a platform, not just a number.
No questions yet on this, just to let you know.
All right. So with that, if you can go to the next slide.
Richard, I see you have your hand raised. If you don't mind, sorry, just typing in any question that you might have into the chat, that'd be helpful. Go ahead. Sorry, Dan, to interrupt.
No, I appreciate that. And apologies. I can't see when people are raising their hands or putting in questions. So the final thing I wanted to share, there's a plan, there's a timing. This is not something that's going to be the project that Paul is leading. That's going to be taking years and years. It's actually going to be completed by the end of this calendar year. The plan was broken down into milestones to ensure that the work that he's doing is moving things forward with urgency and with transparency. So as Paul has been doing this work and leading this, he's been simultaneously giving reports to a steering committee that's representatives of both the OAAA and Geopath executive committees. That's then led to broader and more continuous communication with both full executive committees. And there's been regular check-ins along the way to make sure that he's hitting these milestones and making the progress we need with the urgency we need to ultimately land before the end of the year on a recommendation that will be coming to both boards. This will be both a product recommendation, so looking at that illustrative example that I showed just now, and a business plan. We can't build an ideal approach to media measurement without having the reality check of what is this going to cost? And does this fit into the funding model that we have and the realities of how media owners, media agencies, and marketers need to invest in measurement data? And so the plan is by the end of this calendar year for a recommendation to go to both executive committees that ultimately will lead to further conversation and hopefully a joint recommendation that goes to both boards. Allie, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. I just wanted to just bring up two quick things. When we first started this project, we, one of the things that I raised my hand and said that we really needed as an industry was something that was easy to understand, easy to explain. I have a lot of clients that ask questions about the methodology, and for years it's been hard to explain where these numbers were coming from and how and why. And at the end of the day, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I think that's what we've been hearing from a lot of our members, especially smaller independent operators, is that some of these numbers aren't making sense. And so I think that this project is going to get us to a place where we have those things easy to understand, easy to explain. And I also wanted to just bring up too that there's an out-of-home future forum on October 16th put on by the OAAA and the 4As in New York. And so if you're in New York that week in October, they will be addressing future of measurement at that conference. And I think it's free. So just wanted to bring that up if anybody's in the area. I'll be there. So hopefully if you're there, come say hi.
I'll be there as well. Thanks for the clarification, Allie. I just one last thought for everyone. The project that Paul is leading is operating with urgency. At the end of the day, though, what will come out of it is a recommendation for what comes next for measurement. And most of you either fully understand because you've been living this or understand because it's not that complicated. This isn't going to happen overnight, right? Building this next generation of measurement is something that will take a little bit of time. But the thing that I really wanted to emphasize for everyone is without a plan, it's not going to happen at all. And so I love the fact that we've come together as an industry to build out that plan to give us the ability to then say, if we're really serious about this, if we're really serious about modernizing the approach to measurement and doing it in a way that allows out of home to get out of our silo and to be seen as a core media that's planned in the way that our agencies do, which is based on audiences and outcomes, we need to have this plan and we need to have the commitment of everyone to be able to get to the point where we can deliver that as the output of our industry. So I appreciate everyone's efforts. I appreciate the collaboration that's been happening here. And I guess with that, I'll hand it back over, Rob, to you or to Ally.
Yep, I'll take it, Dan. Thank you very much. I'm gonna ask Scott any last minute questions that you may have received. And if
yeah.
not, go ahead.
No, so no other questions. There was a couple we responded directly to people on that were very specific about timing and things like that related to inventory. There's one broader question that I think would be helpful, and we had slides on it right here about the support materials available and just what they are. So,
Great. Go
if you
jump through.
want me to run through quick, I can jump
Please.
in 30 seconds, do that. So Rob mentioned 2 webinars. So each of these webinars, we're going to go dig deeper into everything that Rob and Ally and Dan talked about. Well, not as much what Dan talked about, but the specific things related to the data set release. So getting to know the 2025 data set, that's where we'll dig into some of these key changes and why they matter. And then the second one on October 30th is a guide to understand the impression update. So that table that Rob shared, we'll go into more specifics on that and what are the things impacting, a particular unit. Why does pedestrian impact certain pedestrian circulation impact certain types of units more than others and things like that. So this will be a deeper dive than we were able to cover today. And then just the last thing, the materials that are available. There's hopefully a suite of materials that you can all access. They're in the Geek Out library, they're in the Learning Lab, they're also on the landing page of the Insight Suite. But going left to right, FAQs, that's a bit of a deeper dive. Some commonly asked questions, obviously, with FAQs. But then as you go to the right, these are more specifically a summary of what are some of the key high-level changes and why they matter. And as you go to the next one, the FAQ, the reach frequency one pager, that gives a high-level understanding of what are the things that change specifically with reach and frequency. There's additional data in the other 2, but that is just focused on reach and frequency. And then there's some tutorials. If you don't feel like reading any of that, you can watch a couple tutorial videos. And then lastly, there's a note to the industry, which I think was asked about. Is there anything that I can send my clients if they're questioning this? So hopefully that could serve as that gives us understanding of what changed, and kind of specifically says that it's really related to methodology, not specifically the physical units themselves. So hopefully this is helpful. You can always reach out to us at geekout@geopath.org if you have any questions. We're always here for you, but I'll hand it back to Rob and Ally and Dan.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ally and Dan. Grateful for your contribution today. You may not have all heard the Oscar music playing behind Scott as he was rushing through there. I do want to say thank you. It continues to be a pleasure to work with all of you. Thanks for your time. I do hope that this provided that level of transparency, and that we'll continue to do that. That's the direction of the organization. So while we may not have gotten to everybody's questions today, we will be here to support you, and please ask those questions. It's an open door, and we'll get you those answers where we can. With that, I wish you a great rest of the day and look forward to speaking with you at some point in the future. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.